Did you know? Assassin's Creed Odyssey was developed alongside Assassin's Creed Origins, which launched the previous year. These two games were purposely developed alongside each other by Ubisoft's Quebec and Montreal studios, with the goal of using them to shift the genre of Assassin's Creed into RPG territory in two smaller steps. Origins would make the franchise more open world and bring in subtle RPG elements, whereas Odyssey would refine these elements and focus on choice and dialogue trees. Odyssey entered production in 2015, but the idea to make the series more RPG-focused came before Assassin's Creed Syndicate had even been completed. Since the Odyssey team knew they'd be building on the foundations laid by Origins, they didn't have to completely rework things like combat. The Origins team focused on an open world, crowd life, and fighting, and the Odyssey team focused on choice, dialogue trees, large-scale battles, and naval warfare. The team at Ubisoft Montreal started production on Origins an entire year earlier than Ubisoft Quebec did on Odyssey, and got their game out a year sooner. This allowed the Odyssey team to implement feedback from Origins as they were making the game. One example is that Odyssey has enemy level scaling, so that enemies in the game's starting areas are stronger when players revisit them. Odyssey's biggest change to the series is arguably its dialogue trees. Although dialogue trees are nothing new in Western RPGs, Odyssey director Jonathan Dumont told DidYouKnowGaming that the system in Odyssey was specifically inspired by the dialogues of Greek classic philosopher Plato. In Plato's dialogues, two characters will argue a topic by asking each other questions, which would often expose inconsistencies in people's viewpoints. Dumont also told us that the writings of ancient Greek author Homer heavily inspired the game. The stories in Homer's Odyssey and Iliad influenced the game's conquest battle system, as well as naval exploration and combat. The game's time period of the Peloponnesian War was chosen not only because it contained hugely important historical figures like Socrates, Leonidas, and Hippocrates, but it presented opportunities for choice. With two warring sides, the player could choose their allegiance. Ancient Greece was also one of the most requested time periods from fans of the franchise. Like all Assassin's Creed games, massive amounts of research went into ensuring the game's world captured the essence of a time and place. Because of how early Odyssey is set in recorded human history, it was challenging for the team to find useful information. The ancient Greeks were the first civilization to take documenting historical events seriously, and produced the man often touted as the first historian, Herodotus. Herodotus' work and other recordings were a key factor in the team's research, and gave them insight into ancient Greece. Although there's always a historian on the team when making an Assassin's Creed game, with Odyssey, Ubisoft hired a specialist with a PhD in ancient Greek history. The team also worked with historians in the UK, Canada, and Greece to make sure the game captured the essence of ancient Greece. They also visited Greece to get a better sense of the country and its climate. The team took a 10-day tour of Athens, Sparta, Delphi, Crete, and several other areas, touring with a historian who told them about several landmarks and locations. Even though historians helped the team find out what ancient Greece was like, the developers didn't want to be limited to simply depicting historical facts. The Spartans of ancient Greece, for example, led very simple lives, and had few possessions or decorations. Despite this, the team chose to make Sparta seem more grand and warrior-like so it would be in line with player expectations. Ubisoft sometimes went the extra mile to be precise, however. Accurately recreating the Temple of Apollo in Delphi took a large amount of effort for Ubisoft's historians and artists, as the temple is now little more than a pile of rubble. After looking into bringing back naval combat, the team realized they'd have to completely rework their existing mechanics. The limitations of ancient Greek technology meant that naval battles consisted of spear and arrow slinging, followed by ramming and cleaving enemy ships. Historians also helped the team come up with sea shanties sung by the player's crew. A composer in Athens wrote melodies for the shanties, some of which are extrapolated from historic texts, and others are tales of the player's accomplishments. Out of all the Assassin's Creed games, Odyssey has the most dialogue and voice acting for the protagonist by far. Letting the player pick from two characters effectively doubled the already large amount of writing during production. Naturally, this was also a strain on the actors, as they had to recreate the same performance for every scene twice. There's over 30 hours of interactive cutscenes in the game, giving some insight into how much extra work needed to be done. To keep pronunciations consistent among actors, the team created a lexicon and recorded a Greek actor reading it aloud. This served as a reference point for the entire cast. Elias Toufexis, who voices King Leonidas, was asked to read scenes from The Godfather in a Greek accent during his audition. Having an actor read dummy text is a common practice, and helps stop details about the project from leaking out. As he was familiar with his Greek grandparents and their accents, Toufexis ended up nailing the role. Assassin's Creed developers have said that they used to operate by the phrase, "history is written that way, so that's the way it should happen." But in recent years, the franchise has shifted to focus more on player agency and how players affect Ubisoft's virtual worlds. When Ubisoft decided to let players romance characters in the game, they also made the decision to give players total freedom with the mechanic. When asked about bisexual and gay relationships in the game's producer Mark Alexis Kutz told the Daily Star, "We took the position from the beginning that, well, who are we to judge? Who are we to limit what players can do in our games? Every time there's a choice, that should be for the player to decide how it pans out. We want our players to understand in who you romance, what gender you romance, as what gender you play as. There are no wrong choices, there are no right choices. There are simply choices and consequences. Trying to romance people in the game isn't straightforward. The team tried to make romance less video gamey by letting the same dialogue have different effects in various situations. For example, hitting on someone when they're grieving compared to when they're happy will have different results, just like in real life. Interestingly, the game was also going to have a Telltale-style user interface element that let players know which choices would have an impact. It was also planned to show the overall results from every player at the end of a chapter. According to scriptwriter Dan Bingham, these elements were scrapped as Ubisoft felt they broke the player's immersion and detracted from the experience. We'd like to thank Ubisoft for sponsoring this video and giving us exclusive behind-the-scenes information on Odyssey. If you're interested in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, the game is now available for purchase on the Ubisoft store. Links are in the description below. And you can also check out the last Did You Know Gaming video on Spider-Man games.